If I asked you to name icons of haute couture, you would probably say names like Christian Dior, Cristobal Balenciaga, or Yves Saint Laurent. But would Charles Frederick Worth come to mind? Probably not, and yet he is the reason why haute couture even exists. We're talking 19th century. That was before fashion houses, runaway shows, and before designers became celebrities. Worth didn't just design clothes. He basically invented the system of haute couture and laid the foundation of the modern fashion industry. Let's start with the beginning of Worth's story. He was born in Lancashire, England, and his story didn't start with glamour at all. He was actually born into a fairly comfortable family, and he was the youngest of 5 children, but only he and one brother survived into adulthood. This wasn't a rags to riches story, at least not at first. But things didn't last because his father struggled with alcoholism, and over time he lost all the family's money. The security that Worth grew up into fastly disappeared, and he had to grow up fast. That's important because Worth didn't come from poverty, but he experienced instability, and he saw how fragile his social status could be. And that might explain something crucial in his later years. That is his obsession with control, with authorship, and putting his name on his creations. So that is why he started working so young. At 11 years old, he was already working in a textile shop where he learned all the basics, the fabrics, the textures, the quality, basically all the things that would later define his career. In his teens, he moved to London, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted something more, something bigger. So at 21, with little money and without even speaking French, he moved to Paris. That was already the capital of fashion. At first, he worked at Gagelin, which was a fabric merchant, and there he started designing dresses to showcase the textiles. This is where things changed because people noticed his designs, and this is also where he met his future wife, whose name is Marie Vernet, and she would later become one of the first models of fashion history. She didn't just support him behind the scenes, she actually modeled his designs. Then in 1858, with a Swedish partner called Otto Gustav Boberg, he opened his fashion house at 7 Rue de la Paix in Paris. That was basically the first real fashion house, the birth of haute couture as we know it. At the same time, Worth's work was gaining attention for one simple reason: the craftsmanship was exceptional. The dresses were beautifully made, luxurious, and they were like nothing else at the time. But the real turning point in his career came with Empress Eugénie, who was the wife of Napoleon III. Everyone at the time wanted to dress her, and Worth knew that if he could win her over, everything would change for him. According to the story, he managed to dress a well-connected princess to wear one of his dresses at court, knowing that the empress would notice, and she actually did. In 1860, Empress Eugénie noticed the dress, asked who made it, and summoned Worth for a meeting the very next day. That moment obviously changed everything for him, and from then on, Empress Eugénie became one of his most important clients. And thanks to her, Worth's name exploded in Parisian fashion. Basically, once the Empress wore one of your dresses, everyone wanted one. And soon his clientele included empresses, actresses, and aristocrats all over Europe. He even dressed international royalty like Empress Elizabeth of Austria and the Russian Tsarinas, which obviously gave him a real international status. Even Queen Victoria wore his designs. At that point, point, Worth wasn't just a dressmaker anymore. He was the most important name in fashion. What made Worth truly revolutionary wasn't just his talent, it was also his attitude. He wasn't submissive to his clients. It was actually quite the opposite. Worth basically believed that he knew better. He even once said, "Women come to see me to ask for my ideas, not to follow theirs." So he pretty much invented the attitude of the designer as we know it today. He would even insist on what should be worn even with the most powerful women in Europe. He saw himself as an artist. He even once said, "I am an artist of the stature of Eugène Delacroix." And because of that, he wanted his clients to be introduced to him before designing for them and not the other way around. Before major balls, every elegant woman in Paris would rush to his store in Rue de la Paix, and people literally queued to see him. Because being dressed by Worth wasn't just about fashion, but it was also about status. American socialites even traveled across the Atlantic to order a gown. For them, his fashion salon wasn't just a shop, it was almost like a monument that you needed to visit. It was something that you had to see. And owning a Worth dress became a symbol of power and influence. Worth came up with a lot of new innovations at the time, and he completely changed the way fashion worked. He introduced seasonal collections, presenting new designs for each season. Clients would come, look at the design, choose a model and order it. That system, which feels obvious today, didn't exist at the time. He also stopped using static mannequins. Instead, he had his dresses worn by live models, showing how they moved and how they flowed on the body. In doing so, he essentially created what we now know as a fashion show. Another first were labels. Worth began sewing his name on his creations. It was something that had never been done before. A Worth label became a guarantee of luxury, craftsmanship, and prestige. For the first time, the designer dictated fashion. Before him, clients were the ones who decided what was fashionable. With him, the trends came from the atelier. And even the most important clients were persuaded, sometimes even firmly, to wear the silhouettes and the cuts he believed in. If we talk about the crinoline, for example, the dresses were massive, uncomfortable, and sometimes dangerous because they could become a fire hazard. So Worth replaced the crinoline with bustles. He didn't invent bustles, but he popularized it, flattening the front of the dress and pushing volume in the back. The result was more elegance and more freedom of movement for the woman wearing them. One of Worth's most famous and notable creation was the Vanderbilt dress that he created for Elva Vanderbilt. It was made of white satin and richly embroidered. It was already stunning as it was, but Worth wanted to add something revolutionary, and so he added tiny electric lights woven into the gown. At the time when electricity just started appearing in homes and public buildings, this made the dress literally glow in the ballroom. So Worth wasn't just designing clothes, he was turning his designs into spectacle and drama. Another iconic creation was Worth Princess line that he made for Princess Alexandra of Wales. Instead of gathering fabric at the waist, the dress flowed in a long line from the shoulders. which created an elongated, elegant silhouette. It was a revolutionary design at the time, and it still influences modern wedding dresses. At the height of his success, Worth employed more than 1,000 employees. He didn't just build the house, he elevated the status of the fashion designer. In 1868, he helped to create the Chambre syndicale de la Haute Couture, formalizing Haute Couture as an institution. And the Chambre syndicale de la Haute Couture is basically the official governing body of Haute Couture in Paris. It is an organization that sets the rule for what can legally be called haute couture. Charles Frederick Worth was one of the key figures behind the Chambre syndicale de haute couture. The idea was to protect designers from being copied, define the standards of haute couture like craftsmanship, like made-to-measure, exceptional craftsmanship, custom fittings, and also organize the fashion industry in Paris and formalize seasonal collections. Even today, a fashion house has to meet all these criteria if they want to be called haute couture. After his death, his sons continued the house, and even though the House of Worth eventually closed his doors in 1952, his legacy never disappeared. His influence didn't stop in the 19th century. Fashion historians see Worth's model of designer-led fashion reflected in icons like Dior, John Galliano, and even modern couture houses like Schiaparelli. Because almost everything that we associate with fashion today, the designer as a star, seasonal collections, fashion shows, label, trend setting, it all started with Charles Frederick Worth. Let me know what you thought about this video. If you know about Charles Frederick Worth, if you have any comments, do not hesitate to leave them below. And I'll see you next week for another one. Take care.